Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya Master, Anne-Marie Young. This is your Daily Dose of Happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. So this is a kind of a different way to get the week started, Anne-Marie, because I don't often start a program off by talking about a movie that I saw or a television program, right? I mean, that's a pretty rare event around here.
That is. I remember Dan and Alex used to do it all the time.
Well, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You would sit
all
there
the time.
going, okay.
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. Well, those two, they could go off on just about any series that had ever been invented. And I'm sitting there saying, what are you talking about? But I actually did watch these particular documentaries, and they were so fascinating that it occurred to me it would make a really cool topic for the program, because they were about current stuff going on in the world of science, particularly in the world of physics and quantum physics, which of course we like to refer to on a regular basis around here,
Yes.
often without knowing what we're talking about. And that was one of the cool things about the documentaries. I actually started to fill in some gaps because I had some understanding of it, but I started to fill in some gaps. By the way, Joel Elston, who will be doing a second show with me later on tonight, shared something on Facebook. If you haven't seen it, you can probably find it on my personal page. So just go to my personal page on Facebook. It is a link to a sort of a cartoon video that is the best presentation, the most clear, easy to understand presentation I've ever seen on the double slit experiment. The one that everybody gets mystified by. Yeah, it is so well presented. I mean, literally, it's presented at the level that a 5-year-old can understand. It is so well done, which is hard to do with that subject, because that's a tough subject.
Yeah, you need to share that with me.
yeah, definitely. I'll share it to you. Yeah. But yeah, any listener who wants to see it, just go to my personal page on Facebook, and you'll see it posted there because I shared it. But really fascinating. But anyway, that's a precursor to what I experienced when I was looking at these videos. One video was about CERN, the nuclear physics organization based in Geneva, Switzerland, that has this massive super collider that they use to try to learn more about subatomic particles and how the universe was put together and all that good stuff. And it was very, very interesting. Probably the most interesting thing about it was the name of the video of the movie. And of course, as soon as I'm saying that, I'm forgetting what the name is, so I'm gonna have to go look it up.
I was going to say, what is it? You're leaving us hanging here.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm good, right? That's part of what we do around here. No, it's called
suspense.
That's right, the suspense. No, it's called The Sense of Beauty, which is not what you'd expect about a physics documentary. But the reason they called it The Sense of Beauty is because it's their way of saying at CERN, we're discovering all this stuff, but we don't understand any of it, but it's really beautiful.
Wow. Don't you just love that?
Yeah. In fact, like I was sharing with you just before we got started here, one of the really cool things now, they, like I said, they are investigating subatomic particles, using the super collider to basically throw atoms and molecules and electrons at each other. And what they were trying to do at one point was to identify and, in a sense, discover a theoretical particle that a mathematician named Robert Higgs had come up with, called a Higgs boson. And they actually managed to pull it off in 2012. Same year I started the podcast, they managed to successfully detect a Higgs boson particle. Now, what is that? Well, I can't tell you all the details of it because I don't totally understand it. But from what I understand, it's very, very similar in behavior to the singularity that preceded the Big Bang, at least in theory.
Right.
So this, in a sense, is kind of their way of trying to understand what happened at the moment of the Big Bang. Well, they succeeded in discovering this this particle, this Higgs boson, in 2012. And when they discovered it, the way it showed up was it showed up as a statistical anomaly in their data, because they're constantly collecting all this massive amounts of data that computers are reading, right? And
Right.
at one point they saw this statistical anomaly, and then after they analyzed it and looked at all the data around it and so forth, they realized, oh my God, that's it. We got it. And it was there. It
Good
was
job they
wrong.
didn't.
It
It's
was
a good
like, it
job they
was
didn't just throw that to one side, isn't it?
right. Oh yeah. Yeah. But
Wow.
it happens so quickly. I mean, it literally happens in a split second. So all they could do is detect it and kind of look after the fact at the record and see, oh yeah, we actually had it there for a split second in time. Now, what makes that really cool also is tied into the second documentary that I saw. Because the second
Mhm.
documentary, I don't have the exact title of it here, but the gist of it is that everything comes out of nothing. Now, that's pretty counterintuitive, right?
Mhm.
Everything comes out of nothing. But what they meant by it is, if you look back, and this is where I started to fill in some gaps in my understanding. If you look back at the recent history of not just physics, but also quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and our understanding of that, that pretty much dates back to the early part of the 20th century. I think it was 1905 that Einstein came up with his theory of relativity, and there had been
Mhm.
discussions leading up to that. Now, we often say here on the program, and other people in our circles say, well, it's Einstein and quantum physics. Actually, this actually clarifies something for me, because I have actually read the general theory of relativity. I can't say I understood it all, but I have read it. I've actually read the special
Right.
theory on relativity too, and understood about 25% of it. But even with my level of understanding, I said, so where's the quantum physics part? It turns out Einstein didn't actually tie it into quantum physics. The person who did tie it in was a mathematician named Max Planck.
Okay.
And you'll recall that there was this controversy that Einstein was involved in with his own theory, where there was this thing that a theory predicted, and he just couldn't buy into it actually being true.
Hmm.
He called it God playing dice with the universe or something like that. That wasn't the phrase,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
was that kind of a thing, right? And the reason for it was because they couldn't figure out a way to reconcile what Einstein had come up with what Max Planck had come up with, because Planck had actually come up with the basic ideas that underlie what we understand now today as quantum physics.
Mhm.
Another piece of it that helped to clarify for me is that Einstein's theory, the person who presented this on this documentary really did a good job. He said what Einstein really did is he taught us that space is curved, that there is a
Right.
curvature to space.
Yeah.
And so he basically helped us to invent a new geometry. And they even gave a great example to show how that geometry works. As anyone who remembers high school math or sixth or seventh form math, as anyone who's been through schooling remembers, who remembers their math classes. A lot of people don't remember their math classes. I figured that part out. But for those who do remember it, a triangle. You have triangles have three angles to them. If you add up those three angles, they add up to 180 degrees.
Yes.
So what if I told you it was possible for them to add up to more than 180 degrees? Yeah, she's
I'd
giving
be
me a look right now.
baffled. I'd be baffled if I'm honest. Well,
So here's how you can visualize it. Imagine
okay.
a deflated balloon flat on the table, okay?
Yes.
And you draw a
Yes.
triangle on it, okay? And then you inflate
Yes.
the balloon. What
Yes.
happens to the lines of the triangle? They kind of curve, don't
The
they?
curve.
And when they
Yeah.
curve, the angles open up.
Of course they do. Wow.
Isn't that
And
cool?
that's what they're saying space is like.
That, in a sense, it's a simplified example of what happens in space. Yeah.
Whoa. I mean, space is already mind-blowing enough
It
without
is.
throwing this other stuff in.
Oh yeah, yeah. So anyway, then you have Max Planck coming along. He's basically known as a mathematician. Interestingly enough, a lot of this theory about quantum physics and so forth originates with mathematics, abstract
Yes.
mathematics.
Makes
Mathematicians
sense.
sitting around and coming up with these really cool things, and they have no idea what the practical application is. And then Einstein comes along and says, "Oh, but that's the basis for relativity." What? What are you talking about? It's that kind of a discovery process. So that's what's driving the whole thing. So you have Planck on one side, you got Einstein on the other, and then they can't reconcile the two. And I won't go into why they can't reconcile two, because actually I'm a little bit fuzzy about how that works. But they're having trouble reconciling the two theories. The two theories, well, it's got to be either there's some way to make them work together, or one of them has to be wrong. That's the basic thinking
Right.
going on at the time. And ultimately, the problem was solved by a British physicist who was a classmate of Cary Grant.
Was he really?
He really was.
In Bristol or Surrey?
In
It
their,
doesn't matter.
well, it was in their, it was in their primary level school. I don't remember what you guys call
Yeah,
it, but it was in that level of school, and Grant was 2 years ahead of the other one. The other one was he was such a quiet boy that he was almost not even known, but he had a really interesting characteristic. It was a characteristic that alienated him from people. He, like many geniuses tend in many cases to be alienated from everyday people. They don't socialize well, and this was definitely true for this one. His particular thing was he had very organized thinking, to the point where he wouldn't say something until he had taken the time to hone it down to its shortest possible complete phrase to express what it was he wanted to say.
Right. Okay, because otherwise he would just lose people.
That's right. Well, he'd lose himself, really. He apparently this also tied in, and I don't know what the details are. Apparently it ties into his upbringing, and there was some really crazy, horrible stuff going on with his upbringing. So one of his ways of getting away from that was looking at the world in this particular way. In addition to it, he had a tremendous ability to visualize, something we appreciate here. He was a huge visualizer. So he would look, and when he went to primary school, he was very good at math, and he was very good at drafting, engineering, blueprint drafting.
Mm-hmm.
The two combined together in his mind to give him the ability to imagine mathematical problems as if they were actual 3D stuff. He could visualize this kind of stuff.
Right. That's insane.
It is.
That's very gifted.
And because of that, he was able to take the Einstein portion, and he was able to take the Planck portion, and he was able to merge them together in a theory that actually held water, that actually held together. That theory also became the basis for the concept of antimatter.
Okay. So
his contribution, and I should look up his name too, so that I don't remember what his name is, but let's put it this way, he is by far Britain's most gifted nuclear physicist of all time. Anyway, he comes up with this theory. It ties it all together, and like I said, part of it is the creation of antimatter. Well, they illustrate this as well in the movie. They illustrate how the way antimatter gets created is also how matter gets created. Through this process that they're describing, this quantum level process, there's a moment where, at some unpredictable time, at an unpredictable way, there is out of nothing, there's like I guess you'd call it a dent in the universe that happens. I don't know how else to describe it. And for that split second in time, at that point where the dent happens, there is a matter particle and an antimatter created at the exact same moment. And then they come back together again. Which is really freaky.
Isn't it?
It's really freaky. So anyway, to take you down, I don't want to go through I don't really understand all of it anyway, but it was fun to watch all this stuff. To take you down the long end of to the other end of the road, they go through all this stuff. It revolutionizes the way physics is understood. It revolutionizes all areas of science, because this is where you get the Heisenberg uncertainty principle that works its way into this conversation, and this double slit experiment that works its way into the conversation. All these different things that we hear about, they all work in because of the sequence of events with Einstein, Planck, and our British friend. Yeah. That combination leads to today, where we have physicists working at CERN and other places around the world trying to continue to solve these issues and solve these problems, solve these questions about, okay, so how does all this stuff work? the one theme that persists over and over again is every time they think they might have it, they're wrong. Every
Really?
time they try to predict something, well, this is what's likely to happen here. You know, the math suggests this. They're wrong. In fact, when they finally did have that Higgs boson particle appear, leading up to that, there were 400 world-renowned nuclear physicists who had written up their own theories about what would happen when they finally were able to detect it. And every single one of them was wrong. They were all wrong.
That's incredible. I mean, all those brains in one place and not one person
not one
had figured out. Because it was just an anomaly.
Yeah.
It was just an anomaly. Wow.
Well, what they're also realizing, though, is despite the fact that they can't explain all this stuff, this is happening all the time. This is where the idea of energy and empty space comes from. We talked about that before, how physics has been buying into the idea that there's no such thing as empty space, that it's actually full of energy. Well, the way they express it is you have all these little events going on, matter, antimatter, no more, over and over and over and over, all over the place, randomly at different places that you can't predict when they're going to happen. And that's what they're seeing. And when they try to map it, of course, they can map things, right, with computerization. They can track the data and they can turn the data into a map so you can see what it looks like. The maps are beautiful.
Really?
I mean, they're like works of art. And they're different every time. It's not the same thing from 5 different angles. It's every single time that they map it, it comes out completely different.
How do you even start to comprehend that information?
Well, now you understand why 400 nuclear physicists got it all wrong when they were trying to predict what would happen.
Well, yeah. And that just goes to show that, I mean, that's taken 100 years to get to that stage.
Yeah.
On all that information. What else are we going to find out?
Well, that's why I decided to title today's episode, The Merging of Science and Spirituality is Happening Now, because they're faced, all these very strong scientific types are faced with something they've never been able, they've never had to face before. And that is, what do I do if I can't find an answer? What if there are no answers to be found here? How do I handle this stuff? And so literally what they're doing is they're looking at it in terms of beauty. That's why that video was titled.
That's why the name.
Yeah. They're looking at it aesthetically because they don't have any other way to understand it.
That must be so inspirational, but so frustrating at the same time.
Humbling too, I would think.
These are like some of the most clever people on the planet.
Right. Yeah.
As you know, and to be fair, the universe is way bigger than us. I mean, you know, the chances are we're not going to understand it, but there's certainly, I just want to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying. What else am I going to find out? It'd just be like a Christmas stocking of nonstop gifts.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Now, the way I look at it also, I tie it into what we talk about here on the program, because anytime we bring quantum physics into it, we're doing it with the idea that thought becomes things, you know, the law of attraction stuff.
Yeah.
And I really believe that that's true. So if I believe that's true, how does that apply here? Well, what it tells me is that thought controls what happens in space, in so-called empty space, that there is thought process going on. Whose thought process? I have no idea. Could be all of ours together. I don't know. But thought is driving this thing. Well, if thought is driving it, and thought is coming, thought can be represented as being creative in its nature. So if it's a creative force going on, of course it's going to be different every time. How could it not be?
Well, yes.
That's why I say that we're getting really close to spirituality and science being on the same page for the first time in history.
It really is, because just to think that there is nothing else, you know, we all know, like, agreed, energy is just everywhere. And like out in space, how powerful must that be? We don't even know what half of the things we can even see, let alone what we can't see, can do.
And well, that's one of the things they identified in one of the films. I don't remember which one. They said that astrophysicists, scientists have been able to demonstrate that we can identify 5% of the known universe. 95% of it we can't identify. 95%.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And that 95% could be 99% because they just still don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what was the initial decision on what happened, did they go into the details of it?
The initial decision of what happened regarding what? Give me
The Big Bang, the Big Bang when it was all created.
That's ongoing. That's ongoing.
It's ongoing.
They're nowhere near resolving that.
Right.
Yeah, that could take a month or 25 years or a century. I mean, it's just
okay. So the anomaly was just this could happen. This is the start of it, and then the rest now you've got to work on.
Well, the anomaly was this Higgs boson particle was an example of something that would be similar to, that would have similarity to a singularity, but it's not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
And in a realm where creativity is everywhere, what does that actually tell you? It doesn't help you to know that, well, it's kind of similar. Similar to what? We're not comparing, yardsticks or meter sticks, that are all the same length. It's not that kind of a comparison anymore. We're comparing oranges to elephants.
That's true. I love that, oranges and elephants. But also, it's quite interesting in the fact that, because a lot of people think this is very woo-woo, like we said many times, people just don't believe in law of attraction. Makes it even more believable.
It does. Yeah.
Just absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I had another fun experiment, both actually, over the weekend. I've talked often with you and with our listeners even about how much I enjoy the energy exchanges that we have on these programs, and I do it with you and with our guests and with the co-hosts and so forth. I love it. And I've expressed the opinion many times. I want listeners to experience it too, because it's great to listen to a podcast, but it's even more powerful when you participate. There's more energy exchange that goes on. And you're both a former listener and a current co-host, so you've been on both sides of it. You know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, there's a difference.
There's a difference, but there's power of a listener is just being able to listen and hear other views and watching a show and being entertained. But then when I come into this space, I'm still getting the same thing, but I'm getting an education on top, because I can ask my own questions and I can put it into my own thoughts. So yeah.
And it's a different energy level too.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. That's what's kept me doing it for all these years, because of the energy that you get from actually doing the show.
Oh yeah. It sets my week up beautifully.
Right. Yeah. So when I tie that together, I think to myself, well, wouldn't it be great if I could find a way to make it possible for listeners to do this, or even anybody out in the quote, real world, unquote. And that also tied into me like, well, as much as I enjoy doing this via the video that we do, I'd also like to have like-minded people in real time in my real world to do it with. Well, I found a group that does that in my own area.
Really?
So I went to, this is their third meeting. I went to join them for their third meeting over the weekend. And I'm talking to all these people who are talking about the same kinds of things we've been talking on the program for years. One of them ran a spiritual center. Another one is somebody who is able to visualize things before they happen. Another one had out-of-body experiences. I mean, all the stuff we've been talking about, these guys are all into already.
Oh my gosh, I wish I lived closer.
Yeah, I'm kind of blown away. There were 5 people, so I was the 6th. And we had a great time getting to know each other and sharing stuff and so forth. We're going to do another meeting in another month. And so once again, getting the experience of having this energy exchange, but on a more direct in-person level. So to me, the whole thing all just kind of fits together.
Yes. I was going to say, tell me about how you felt in that meeting, because it's not often you get people in outside world who have these wonderful views.
The first thing that I thought was, okay, I'm not doing a podcast, so I have to shut up.
And did you? Or
I did.
I thought you'd have lots of questions still.
Well, no, I did. I mean, I made sure that, put it this way, I wasn't trying to dominate the conversation. Not that I really tried to, but I tend to, just because I'm hosting the program. But there, I was trying to make sure I was only contributing 1/6 of the conversation, because there were 6 of us there, So I was, let's put it this way, I was metering myself. How about that? Okay. Yeah. Trying to keep myself under control and grinning all the way.
I was going to say, I can imagine you literally just sitting on your hands going, oh my God, this is amazing. I just want to know more.
Well, actually, what I wanted to do is I wanted to tease everybody. You know how I like to, crack little jokes and so forth, get people laughing here on the show. I was doing the same thing there.
Yeah.
And it was fun because I mean, here I get to see your reaction or a guest's reaction or another co-host, but there I got to see the audience's reaction because they were right there.
Yeah.
So it was stuff from my usual repertoire that I've said before here on the program, and I would do the same thing with them, and they'd be falling over with laughter, like, "Oh, this is great! This is wonderful! I love this." But I was also, to answer your question, I was also just kind of sitting there. I was actually a little tense because, oh my God, I am connected right now in person with people who have the same kind of energy. And I think my body was kind of like constricting itself, like, oh God, do I dare open myself up to this? Because I'm not used to doing that. I'm used to doing it here
Yeah.
on the program, on the podcast, but not in
Mhm.
person. So there's actually a comfort level I need to acquire, so to speak, which is interesting. I didn't really
But that
expect.
will come with time and trust, and that kind of
Oh,
makes
sure.
sense because our own personal energy, and we've known each other years now,
Right.
and we invite these guests in and we get to talk to them, but there's already that kind of trust between us, so you
Yes.
just need to build that with your fellow group.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And what
and
did
that
the energy feel like in there?
well, we were
Did you
outdoors.
feel the actual so you were in nature as well?
Yeah, we were in a park, and we were sitting at a picnic table in the park having our conversation. How did the energy feel? It felt you know how here on the program when you and I are talking or when we have a guest, we can feel kind of a flow of energy that goes on.
Mm.
One person has a thought and then the next person has the next thought and the energy flows to them and it just keeps flowing like that. Well, that happens here as well in person, but something else is happening too. The energy is bouncing around.
Really?
It's not just energy flowing through one person to another to another. It's like all energy bouncing in all directions at the same time.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
I mean, I was literally feeling there was a woman sitting next to me, a woman in front of me, another woman here, a man there, and a man there. Particularly with the two who were either in front of me or next to me. Every time that they shifted, every time that they said something, it was like this woof of energy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whoa, which you don't really get here on the podcast. I mean, we kind of get it a little bit, because we can pick up on each other's vibration. We can see each other
Yeah.
on video and so forth. But it's palpable in person. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Because that's why I asked, because I know, I'm always excited and my body's always like energized when I'm in here. And I know when I finish here, it's like 10 o'clock at night. So I'm ready for bed really.
Yeah, right.
But sometimes I'm just so energized I can't sleep, even though I've been like really tired all day. So that energy does boost me. But I never meet somebody face to face who's got a similar interest, or you just have a connection. It doesn't even have to be over this. You just can feel that energy, right? So I just thought 6 people all passionate about the same thing, and when that's not the norm,
Right.
it's just sounds incredible.
It is. It is. It is incredible. And to add on to what you were just saying, one of the ways, I mean, there are lots of different kinds of body language we get, right, when we're interacting with people. One of the ways that I was noticing body language among our group was how big everybody's eyes were.
Yeah.
You know how your eyes get big when you're excited about something?
Yeah.
Everybody, I looked around the table, everybody's eyes were big the entire time. We were all just connected, like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing it, that kind of thing. And there were actually 3 of them that knew each other previously. So they were kind of the core. And then there were 2 others who were new besides me. So I was one of the 3 new people. But even with the fact that they had 3 of them who knew each other, there was a lot of body language going on. That's probably the best way to say it. There was a lot of nonverbal communication going on. And it was electric.
Yeah, I bet it was.
Yeah.
I bet it was. Good manifestation there. You wanted that experience.
Whoa. And I'm going to get it again and again and again every time I want it, really, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, literally, as you were saying that, though, about how you felt in it, I was just thinking back to all those scientists in Geneva, 400 of them going, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm sure that's what it amounts to. I mean, they were doing it in their professional manners, whatever their professional manners were, but how could they not? it's
you'd have to get a bit excited, wouldn't you?
yeah. I mean, it's kind of like working on Elon Musk's rocket, and the rocket takes off, and then the fuselage lands afterward on its fins, and yeah, we did it! Hooray! It's that kind of a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's going to be very similar for the physicists as well, and that's what I think it makes it so interesting about the fact that they can't figure out why the whole thing works, or how it works, or they can't predict how it's going to work, or what it's likely to do, and so forth, and the frustration that's associated with it. Because, like you were saying, it's kind of like an excited frustration. Like, yeah, I'm frustrated, but now I got to find out what's going on. I got to find out why can't I even understand this? There's got to be a way to understand it.
Of course, like when you've got an ailment and nobody seems to knows what's going on, and as soon as you've got a diagnosis, you're like, at least we know where to start now.
Yeah, right. Yes. Well, fortunately, that's not an illness. Fortunately, that's more like a passion. But
oh yes,
yeah,
yes,
that must be quite incredible. But to me, that just once again it reinforces the theme behind today's episode, which is because science, particularly physics, nuclear physics, astrophysics, because they're up against something that they can't solve and they don't understand and isn't making any sense to them, to the point where they're looking at it in terms of aesthetics, in terms of its beauty.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, imagine what it's like, even though they don't understand it, they're experiencing it. It was 12 years ago they had that experience. I think they may have had one incident since then. I mean, that's how rare it is for them to have an actual event. But they lead up to it all that time, and they're working on stuff. They're writing their programs, and they're building their models and all this other kind of stuff. And then it all falls apart. Well, let's try it again. Which either makes them dedicated or insane. I'm not sure which. But the point is that they keep doing it. They just keep driving themselves after it, right? That kind of passion, when you tie it in with I don't know, which is the most honest thing a scientist can say.
Yeah.
That's one step away from what we talk about. That's one step away from spirituality.
And yeah, just before you said that, I was thinking it's just like the beauty of the unknown. And that's why, people might come in and say the most crazy things, certainly against what mainstream says, but I never not believe it. I never not believe it, because I just think anything is possible.
Yeah.
Anything.
In fact, one of the things I've had to come to terms with is not only is everything possible, it's likely.
Yeah.
I still shake my head at that. Like, really? It's all likely?
You could send yourself down a right rabbit hole with that one, but we'll keep it on the positive.
Well, we got enough rabbit holes for today.
Yeah.
They're trying to deal with the black holes. I mean, that's where that unknown stuff is, in the black holes. But yeah, I do recommend both of the documentaries. I think they're both on Amazon Prime, but I think they're also in other places too. So check whatever you subscribe to, and look for them. The one being the Science of Beauty, or the Beauty of Science. I don't remember which it is, one or the other. And then the other one is about everything from nothing. It has a longer title than that, but it begins with everything from nothing. Check those videos out. You may not understand most of it. I can't say I understood all of it, but it won't matter, because talk about the beauty part, the beauty movie. Oh my goodness. You should see the stuff that the computers were drawing. Absolutely gorgeous.
Really?
Absolutely beautiful, breathtakingly beautiful. Yeah. They had one that was a kind of an egg-shaped panel, if you will, in which the computer drew the energy patterns that it calculated must have happened at the time of the Big Bang. And you look at this pattern. Of course, it's like it's colors and shapes and all that kind of thing. And then they showed it being drawn very slowly, and all these curving, curly Q things going on. I mean, it was like a dance, watching it draw itself. Yeah, it was beautiful. In fact, at one point during the show, they had actual interpretive dancers dancing in a merged video background with what it was they were trying to present to you, to kind of illustrate to you there's a dance going on here.
Yes.
I mean, how cool is that? We're talking physics, for goodness sake.
But I love that that's happened. I love that it's not just rock hitting rock and
Right.
sparking. It's much, much more. And sometimes I quite like that unknown,
Mm.
not figuring it out, not knowing, just because that makes me, you know, I think, for an example, I've seen something previously where they've asked AI to draw
Mm.
like a bunny, or draw a happy bunny, draw a happier bunny, draw a happier bunny. And in the end, it ends up in what they believe God
Right.
would look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen that, just all this possibility,
And creativity.
creativity. Yeah.
To me, that's the word that ties the whole thing together. Because if we're right, I think we are, if we're right that this is a thinking universe, this is an alive, in a sense, self-conscious, self-aware universe, an energetic universe,
Mm.
then it's also a creative universe. It has to be.
Oh, the fact we're able to walk on a circle upside down,
Yeah.
everything is just perfect. I mean, that has to be.
Mm-hmm. So the creativity, when you let it loose, because that's essentially what has happened. They've let the creativity loose because they can't do anything else. They don't know what else to do with it. They're trying desperately to make mathematical rules about it and so forth, and all their rules are falling apart. But
So, sorry, Rob.
no, I was just going to say that because of that, we're living in a time where the creativity is maximized because they can't apply rules to it. I mean, what is it we talk about? The only thing that holds us back from manifesting the stuff that we want to manifest is our own limitations. Well,
Exactly.
that's what that is. That's a limitation, right? If there are no rules in place, there are no limitations. We're in a maximum creative space right now.
Now, I'm not saying that scientists are creative, because obviously they are creative, but I just wonder if they're engaging with people with different kind of brains, like more creative, more artistic people, more. Are they introducing other kind of professions into it?
You get the sense that they're doing that. I mean, certainly the video itself, especially the one that had the interpretive dancers dancing in the background, that there was a clear analogy going on there.
Sure.
I don't recall that they actually introduced a conversation between a creative type and a scientific type. I don't recall that happened, but it was implied throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
So even if there's not a particular request that was put out, bring on the creative types, you can tell it was happening.
Yeah.
It was happening anyway.
Well, I'm sure their minds are being opened daily.
Sure. Oh yeah. And yet they're still trying to tie it all together mathematically. Which, I mean, power to them.
Makes
I love it.
Yeah.
I hope they find a way to do that. Wouldn't it be great if they could actually define a mathematics that helps to describe creativity that seems so random, that seems so all over the place. First of all, it wouldn't be a single formula. It can't be.
No.
I mean, even the Higgs boson came from the theories of Robert Higgs, and his theory is about a field. It isn't about a particle. It's about a field, because it was the only way he could make sense out of what it was he was trying to describe. In other words, he couldn't apply a single formula to make it work.
I've just got visuals in my head of Einstein coming back, just like, because anything's possible again. I knew it.
There was also something they were describing, and I still don't quite understand what they were saying, but they were describing how on the Einsteinian side of it, the curved space side of it, how the Einstein theory teaches us that objects aren't actually drawn to each other. Instead, they curve to each other.
Okay.
I mean, you can kind of get a feel of that, but as I try to make that specific, I say, well, how does that work? And I haven't been able to figure that out. I don't quite understand that part yet.
it kind of makes sense, like with the Earth being curvature, and like you said, that triangle being curvature.
What they seem to be implying is that it isn't a mass drawn, it's a curve happening, and the curve creates essentially the illusion of one object being drawn to another one.
Right. Okay.
Which, even as I say that, I think that doesn't make any sense, but it does to them.
I think I'm going to have to watch this. This has me intrigued.
Yeah, I recommend both of them, and I watched them back to back. It was one of those deals where, you know, you watch the one program and then the service says, by the way, you might also like this one. So, you know, the second one was, oh, I'll watch the other one that I might like as well, and I did, which is pretty rare. Usually I don't like the second one, but this time I did. It was really, really good. The other thing that was cool about the CERN video was you got to see inside the facility. You got to see people working at their workstations or having conversations or whatever. And it created a human element to it that we don't normally associate with science. I mean, these were people who are just, you can imagine them just going to the office every day and doing their stuff and having these conversations. It's just that you don't understand the conversation. But literally, it's like anybody else going to work. That's what they're doing. You know, so it creates a human element, a human side to it that we kind of dismiss sometimes where science is concerned. I think most of us think of science as, you know, somebody in a white lab coat off in a corner doing something and there's nobody else in the laboratory.
Yeah.
Right? That
with like a stethoscope and a computer. And, yeah,
exactly. Yeah. When in fact, it's not that at all. So humanizing the science people is a good thing.
And it's funny how, and this is what I do, like, is, you know, they are different in school, like that they communicate in a different way, but when they get together, the power, it's like, it's that whole find your tribe thing, isn't it? It's just, I love that everybody's so different and that everybody's different for an absolute reason.
Oh, speaking of which, interesting thing that came out of the group that I met over the weekend, the group of 6, because I heard them expressing a lot of the fears that we've talked about on the program. All the things that, you know, like people fearing, well, the earth is being destroyed, or, you know, all that stuff. And here they are, they're expressing it all. And here I am sitting there thinking about what you and I learned in boot camp about appreciating the stuff that scares us and all that kind of thing. And I'm throwing little tidbits out there and I'm getting these looks from them. Because on the one hand, they recognize there's truth to what I'm saying, so they try to agree, but they also find ways to push back. It's really interesting to watch, because it's kind of like watching where I was at years ago.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, it kind of is. At one point, I proposed the idea of appreciating things that we really dislike. And of course, as soon as I said that, somebody said Donald Trump. But the point is that they started pointing at things that they didn't like. And you could just tell from the looks on their faces and so forth. And here I'm smiling. And they must have thought I was Looney Tunes or something. Because here I am smiling at all this stuff that they're talking about that they don't like. And all I can think is, wow, I can appreciate that. I don't have to like it, but I can really appreciate it.
Well, yeah. And it's growth. You're all going to grow together. You're going to grow from things that they say. They'll grow from you, from your perspective, from what we've learned. Because I mean, I certainly know from what I've learned, it works for me.
Yeah.
And it works for other people I know who use it.
Oh, it was a fun one too. After we were all done, we broke up. We set our next meeting date. Everybody started to disperse, and the organizer and one other guy, the 3 men were left. 3 women had left, but the 3 guys were still there. And the organizer was kind of picking our brains about how to promote the group, because he had tried so hard. The group was set up through meetup.com. And so he had tried through Meetup, and there were like 50 people who had signed up for the group, but only a few people were coming to the events. And he was frustrated with that. And what do I do? Well, did you get the message I sent out trying to get people to encourage them to come and so forth? And all I could think is what I'd learned about law of attraction. I said, don't send the messages out. He says, why?
Yeah.
I said, well, when you sent it out, did you feel like they were going to come? Well, no. Well, you got what you asked for, didn't you? Oh, yeah.
You're
Just don't do
forcing
it.
something.
Just do what we do with the podcast. I mean, I started the podcast with no clue at all that
Mhm.
I'd ever have listeners. The first time after about 100 episodes, the first time I got an email from a listener, I was in shock because the first thought that came to me, this is one of my jokes I told to them. The first thing that came to me was, oh my God, I have listeners. What have I said? But I treated it that way, and I've treated it that way since day one. And listeners have found me. They found
Mhm.
us. They just, I mean, I don't even, you may not even know how you found the show, but somehow you found the show at one point and you liked it. And so you kept
Mhm.
listening to it. And that's the point. We don't have to know how to bring them in. All we have to know is if we have a good time, they're going to show up. They're going to find us.
Yeah.
And so that's what I
And like,
told them. We just have
yeah.
to, our group of 6 have to get together and have a good time. And if we do that, other people are going to start to show up. He said,
Well,
oh,
exactly, because if you've got that energy, it's just going to attract like-minded, isn't it? We, you know,
exactly.
we know that if you force it, if you're just concerned on numbers, and it's just appreciating that 6 of you to start with.
That's
It'll
right.
grow.
6 is pretty good, I thought.
Yeah.
For a starting number, that's really good. I mean, I would
Well,
have thought, 2 is good, but 6 is
there's
really
a whole
good.
book. There's a whole book on the power of 8.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. We're 2 away from that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I think it's really potent. I found it fascinating also that I could explain that to him, and because he had enough understanding about how all this stuff works, he didn't fight it. He's like, "Oh,
No.
okay." It was instant acceptance.
Yeah.
There was no struggle, no resistance. Like, oh, all right, well then I'll do that. I mean, how often do we experience that in life?
Not often. Not often.
Yeah,
But how
that's the point.
refreshing.
It is. Yeah, it was refreshing and encouraging, and it just tied into what I was talking about earlier. That we live right now in a realm of incredible creative possibility because nobody understands all the rules,
Mm-hmm.
which is the best possible thing.
I mean, yeah, the world is certainly changing, and I think this creativity will take over.
Oh yeah,
because I know it seems all doom and gloom, but it's happening for a reason. This
everything.
creatively, this beautiful energy is gonna.
I actually have. I'm gotten to the point now, and I'm kind of proud of myself of this. I've gotten to the point where I'm looking around and I'm having trouble seeing things from the doom gloom perspective anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and there's things like the past few weeks. My mother passed last year, and I started to feel like sad again. I thought I was getting on a high, but again, just having that beauty of that grief is just changing that perspective, and it's not a bad thing. It's not pulling me down. It's not making me feel like myself all the time, but that's a good thing because I think it's beautiful. And yeah, I'm not experiencing a lot of things that other people are. That's pretty much my bad thing at the moment. Everything else is tickety boo, but I know it's not like that for everybody else.
Well, and the other thing I'm really appreciating, I don't always feel up, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, well, I'm not feeling up right now. Big deal. Not that I'm not going to keep trying. I will keep trying. I mean, I'm working on projects to help enhance that, but I'm just not beating myself up about it anymore. I'm not saying, oh,
exactly.
I'm a failure for it.
Oh gosh, yeah. That hard critic.
Yeah.
That we used to live in our heads. And still pops out occasionally, but just do one.
Yeah. Yes, he does. Or she, or it, or whatever it is. I don't know.
It's man-made.
Yeah, we're good at that. Well, that shows how creative we are. I had an interesting exchange with a guy. I don't do a whole lot with LinkedIn, but I had an exchange with a guy on LinkedIn. He posted something. What was he posting? He asked a question about why is it that podcasters are so product oriented or something like that. So, something that basically accused all podcasters of being just in it for the money. That's the essence.
Okay.
Of it. And so I wrote back.
I take it you're counting your millions behind your desk.
Yeah. No, I wrote back to him. I said, well, I know what he said. He says, why is it that all podcasters are only interested in prestige? And so I wrote back, well, what makes you think that all podcasters are only interested in prestige? And he actually took offense at my question.
Really?
He took offense. Yeah. He wrote back and he said, why couldn't you just answer the question? Don't you know it's rude to answer a question with another question? I mean, clearly you're one of those people who's just in it for the money. I said,
Wow.
okay.
You're a podcaster who asks questions.
Yeah. So I wrote back to him, I think you really completely misread me. I don't do a podcast in order to sell things. I mean, I have guests who come on to sell things, and I'm okay with that, but I don't try to sell anything on the podcast. That's not the way I think about it. So that's why I asked why you thought it was all about prestige, because I mean, that's about the last thing I think about when I do a podcast episode. Like, can you imagine you and I getting together and, okay, what are we going to do that's prestigious today? Like, no, it doesn't work.
This is my mouse, and we're selling my mouse.
Yes, right. But what an interesting worldview he had is what my point is. I encountered this guy who had this really tightly wound worldview that said that all people who are in podcasting are in it for the prestige and the money. Wow.
No, you did this for education, and then you did this to teach.
Yeah.
And you did this to make a difference to people's lives, which you've achieved.
Yeah.
But I find it quite rude in the fact that he's made this decision and his decision is right. Why can't you question that?
Right.
Why can't you question that?
Yeah.
You should always question with a question.
In fact, I kind of threw it back in his face. I said, all right, well, if I have to answer your question, why don't you have to answer mine? I mean, fair is fair. Right? If the rule is I have to answer your question, then clearly you have to answer mine too. Otherwise, it's an unfair rule.
Were you then blocked?
I haven't checked. I don't know. It's quite possible. I wouldn't rule it out. Let's just say it's not on my list of top 25 things to check after we're done with the podcast episode.
No, I was just joking.
Because I really don't care all that much. But it was interesting. It was interesting to, that's what I think the reason I was thinking about that is from doing the podcast, we've encountered so many different viewpoints, so many different perspectives. And I've really learned to appreciate those. I think you have too. So now when I encounter a perspective that is way, way different from my own, I can actually appreciate it. I don't necessarily like it. I'm not really interested in knowing the guy, but, okay. Boy, he must have a really, out there perspective in order to come to that conclusion. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Before I might have been offended by it, but now it's just like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
Well, it's this podcast that has made me believe that anything is possible, because I've just heard so much stuff that I would never have heard of, or I would have just disbelieved. I don't disbelieve. I just know we can't prove everything, and we don't know everything, which is what the conversation has been. And I just truly believe that anything is possible. And that's a lovely way to think.
It is. And well, I would even add on for myself, it isn't just that anything is possible, but anything is possible and I don't need to prove it. I used to want to prove everything, and I have almost no need to prove anything anymore. But the only thing I ever want to prove is I have a new venture in mind. So I want to prove, in a sense, I want to prove that the venture works by trying it out to see if it works. That's about as far as my proof goes. It doesn't go a whole lot farther than that.
Well, you want to do things, and you want to do things well, don't you?
Yeah.
But
sure.
I've always been one of those trust your gut people, and you can't explain that. How do I know that my stomach is right? How do I know that my intuition, before I even knew any of this, I always trusted my gut. You can't explain that. So that was the start of my whole anything is possible. Yeah. And coming on here and hearing wonderful people with great stories, I believe them.
Yeah, it's fun. So tying it all back to the original topic, because the original topic was the merging of science and spirituality. Yeah. I think we've explored a lot of that. Do you get it? Have you gotten anything new? Anything? I mean, like I always, if we have a guest on, I always ask you to tie it together, right? To what are the main elements? What are you pulling out of what we're talking about today that tells you X, whatever X is about this potential merging of science and spirituality?
I find it really exciting. I think it's bringing in two worlds together. I think there's many people who have just doubted that universal law or energy, and that everything is energy, law of attraction. People have just dismissed this stuff. And I find it very exciting that the worlds are now colliding. So I'm excited to see what comes out.
By the way, I can add something to what you just said. I normally leave it alone, but this time I gotta add it.
Go.
Because law of attraction, manifesting, has finally made it into TV commercials. I actually saw a promotional message. I don't even remember what it was for, but you know how a lot of the advertisers, they like to create a scene where there's something comical going on. They want you to laugh at whatever it is to help, remember whatever their brand is. Well, this scene did the same thing. They were trying to give you a certain concept, and then to kind of play off of it, they were showing other people handling the same concept in different ways. And one of the people was talking about how they had just manifested this amazing thing. They were talking the way we talk about it. So they were making fun of it, but they were tying it in. My point is, it has made it to the mainstream, to the point where they actually included it in a commercial.
I think it's getting that you can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it.
But if you had told me 12 years ago when I started this podcast that we would get to this point within 12 years, I would have said, yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, that is the tough thing, because we all think about manifesting the exciting things, but when we think about we've manifested all the hardships that we felt and the trauma we've endured, that's a tough pill to take.
But for me, it was even the harder pill was that this could ever gain acceptance, that the stuff we talk about. I'm still kind of blown away by that. Just how often we get contacted by somebody who wants to be on the show. Oh, I love law of attraction. Like, holy crap, where'd all these people come from? I mean, when I started this thing, I couldn't find any. I was struggling to find people who were into law of attraction when I first started the show, because I wanted to have guests on the program. Now I can hardly walk down the street without tripping over somebody. I mean, that to me describes just how much of an explosion of attention and interest there's been in the topic in just the last 12 years. Like, wow, stuff that would have been considered. I don't even hear the words woo-woo anymore. I mean, that used to be the thing. That's how you would describe this is all that woo-woo stuff. Nobody ever talks about it that way anymore. It's gained a level of acceptance beyond woo.
I don't meet as many people who are so like-minded, but I think it's, like you say, I can see it slowly trickling into my friends' lives.
Yes, exactly. I don't meet that many who are like-minded either, but it's just amazing how often people have heard of it, and they don't treat it with disdain, and that's interesting stuff and all that kind of thing. Okay.
Well, this is like we say all the time. This is why it should be in schools.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother story.
If it's in commercials, we're one step away from it being in the schools. It's going to happen. Yeah.
I hope so.
But on
That's
the other hand, by the time, right. But on the other hand, by the time it gets into the schools, it'll probably at that point be the point where the schools are starting to fall apart as we know them anyway, and turning into something else completely different. Because the moment that you introduce a paradigm shift like that, everything has to shift.
Yeah. Well, that's when ChatGPT can tell them all about it.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, in terms of this episode, I'm glad we had fun talking about this. This is good stuff.
Yes, and thank you. I look forward to watching those programs. Thank you for telling me about them.
Yeah. And I urge all listeners to, if you have the time, they're a little bit long. One's about an hour. The other one's almost 2 hours, but they're worth it. They're really worth it. They're good programs. So, all right. So thank you, Anne-Marie. Appreciate you so much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.